Hello and welcome to Jolineknitsalot. This is my show about knitting and crafting and the things I get up to here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. This episode is a bit of a recap. In 2024, I got excited about knitting socks, specifically socks designed by Summer Lee. She's my favorite sock designer, I think partly because of her color choices and also her design aesthetic. Summer came out with a new book in 2024 called The Sock Project, and I got really excited about this book and a lot of the patterns in this book. In August, Summer came out with the Colorwork Cuff Club, a knitting pattern club where knitters got a colorwork chart once a month for a year starting in August, accompanied by a sort of basic sock pattern that you could plug that colorwork chart into. And again, I got excited about socks all over again. So in 2024, I knit a whole bunch of Summer Lee socks, and I thought I would share them with you today. In January of last year, I was busy finishing up some other projects and wrapping things up, and so I didn't get started on my year of Summer Lee socks until February. February is actually also when her book, The Sock Project, came out, and I received my copy shortly after it was published, and I was very excited. So I started off knitting some of her basic socks. Summer Lee's book, The Sock Project, has a whole chapter on basic socks, which allows you to play with heels and toes to see what fits you best. And so the first pair I knit was this pair, basic sock number 1, with sort of a standard wedge toe that looks like this, and a heel flap and gusset. This was knit using some leftovers I had from stash. This is Sassy Strings, and I want to say this is some Polka Dot Creek yarn. So this was basic sock number 1, and from there I thought I'd try some of the other techniques that were different or not my usual way of knitting socks. So basic sock number 1 led to basic sock number 3. I don't know why I skipped number 2. I just did. These are knit in some tuku fingering, and you can see right away that they are kind of different. They have a short row heel, which is again not a heel that I'm used to knitting. And they also have a folded cuff. And so this cuff is knit cast on here at these yellow stitches, knit up, and then you switch colors, and then at some point you knit some stitches together, and that's what creates the cuff. Again, I was just sort of playing with some of the ideas that she had for different types of socks. So basic sock number 3 here again has a folded cuff and a short row heel. This is again knit in some tuku fingering that I had lying around. In March, I moved on to basic sock number 5. Again, playing with those different ways of knitting socks. So this pair of socks is actually knit from the toe up. It has, again, a wedge heel, but this time it's created using increases because you cast on right here. And then it's got a fleagle heel. The fleagle heel always reminds me of an upside down heel flap and gusset because there are some decreases and then short rows here that create this shape in the back of the heel. And if we have a look at my first pair of socks that I knit a heel flap and gusset, and I flip it upside down, you can see it's that similar shape. So you see the decreases here are similar to these decreases, and then there's this short row shaping here, which is similar to this short row shaping, although it happens for a much larger section of the heel as opposed to the heel flap and gusset. So as you can see, I was trying different sock constructions, and I did a stretchy bind off at the top. So that's basic sock number 5. Again, I used some hemp sock yarn for this pair of socks, and then some stash for the toes and the cuffs. In March, I also knit this lovely pair of lace socks. These are the Murmuration socks, again from the Summer Lee sock book, and I haven't knit lace socks in a while, and I had fun using this speckled yarn from Polka Dot Creek. It was their birthday yarn that reminds me of Neapolitan ice cream. So the Murmuration sock just has this lovely little lace pattern going down. And those were my March socks. In April, I cast on the leap year socks. Leap year was a pattern that Summer came out with to celebrate leap year of 2024, and I knit mine in some Stroll tweed yarn. I'm not used to knitting socks with tweedy yarn. I think this was really pretty though, and I used some contrast yarns that I have lying around for these stripes at the cuff and the toe as well. In April, I also knit these rather blinding socks, the Seafair Socks. I had this really bright yarn left over from a pair of Stephen West socks that I had knit. And so I decided that what could be better than some neon cabled socks. The Seafair Socks, a pattern from the sock project book yet again, and I knit these as kind of shorties, but I'm really looking forward to wearing these. Most of the socks that I'm showing you today have not been worn. They've just been stashed away so that I could share them all with you now and then put them on my feet at the beginning of this year. So the Seafair Socks, some really fun neon socks. They look a little bit smaller. That's just because of the ribbing and the cable. If I put them on my hand, you can see that they stretch out really nicely. These are going to be fabulous in dark days, I think. They're super bright and lots of fun. In May, I cast on the Scandiland Socks. These were a big challenge. I have knit some colorwork socks in the past, but these Scandiland ones were definitely a big challenge, partly because of all of the colors being used, cutting in a afterthought heel, and keeping track of all of the color work going on while still maintaining a nice stretchy gauge so that they would fit on my feet. I did follow Summer's suggestions of going up in needle size and using a 9-inch needle. 9-inch needles have not in the past been my favorite. I find them kind of fiddly in the past, but I did really like them for using color work, and I used them for all of the color work socks I have knit since. I used very similar colors to Summer's original sock pattern. Partly I think because with all the colors going on, I was a little bit scared to veer from them, and partly because I just really love her color sense. So these were knit using a lot of Knit Pick Stroll. I really like their color lines, and I find them to be an affordable and soft sock yarn to use. So you can find all of the colors that I used on my Ravelry page if you're really interested. But these are the Scandiland socks, and I just think these are just beautiful, especially for Christmas time. And I did get myself some pajamas that would really match these. So I'm looking forward to wearing these in the new year. In May, I also knit the French Connection socks, another pair of tweedy socks. These ones use short or sort of narrow stripes combined with longer stripes. I had to practice knitting jogless stripes, and I think that these socks were a great opportunity for me to practice that technique, and I think I did a fairly good job. I don't think that the sock or the join rounds really show. They'd be on this side, I think, right around here. So I think I did a pretty decent job. These socks combine a tweed yarn from Polka Dot Creek as well as a tweed yarn from Knit Picks, and I'm liking the texture of these tweedy sock yarns. It'll be interesting to see how they wear, if they wear well or not, and I will let you know in future episodes as I figure out and wear these socks more. And actually, having knit these, my older daughter is now requesting a pair of stripy socks. So this was good practice for future striped socks. I knit one pair of Summerlee socks in June, and they were quickly stolen by my younger daughter, and you can see worn. These are the Sunnyside Up Socks. Again, I use yarn colors quite similar because I think that I really liked the idea of Sunnyside Up Socks. I used some leftovers again for the rather long stretchy heel, and my daughter has been wearing these on really cold days, and some days she even puts them on over top of another pair of socks just to be cozy. So I think you can see that with this pair of socks, the knit pick stroll has worn nicely. There is a bit of wear and tear, but that's pretty normal with wool socks. And it just shows that they've been well loved, I think. So these are the Sunnyside Up Socks, also from the sock project. In July, my family and I went on a rather long trip. We went to Italy and Croatia. And so we were trying to pack light, and I thought socks would be a great travel knitting project. So I packed 50-gram balls of yarn so that I would have very little left over to take with me as I went. So in July, I knit a lot of summerly socks. The first pair I knit was this pair of Chamelia socks. The Chamelia socks, the pattern in the book has this lovely lace pattern running down the center of the foot, but I moved it to the side so that I could have two socks that sort of mirrored each other with the lace patterns running down the side of the sock. I used some lightly speckled sock yarn, which I think is really pretty for these lace socks, and I think a good use for the speckled sock yarn in my stash. So these are the Chamelia socks. And then I knit the Queta Socks. Again, a lacy project with some panels that run down each side of the sock. You can see that they sort of match each other. Again, these ones are more even with the lace running down each side of the sock. But they were great and an easy lace pattern to knit while traveling. Again, I used a speckled sock yarn, this time from Polka Dot Creek, one of my favorite dyers. And so these socks were a great travel project because of that very easy 4-row lace pattern. I cast on these Honeycomb and moss socks on my trip as well. You can see they're just tiny little ankle socks. And I use this really bright yarn, again from Knit Pick Stroll. And they've got a lovely cable pattern running down the center with some moss stitch in the middle. As you can see, matching cables down either side, and a simple moss stitch in the middle. Moss stitch isn't my favorite, but you're only knitting it on a small portion of the sock, and the back of the sock is stockinette, so it was okay. I did enjoy knitting these socks. They're super cute little shorties, and I think they'll be nice in warmer months. And finally, on the plane ride home, I cast on these Som Socks. The Som Sock pattern has got a faux cable. As you can see here, it's got a little bit of an eyelet in the middle, and then a textured pattern in the middle. I used some Knit Picks Stroll in their tweedy color, and I had very little left of this yarn at the end. I think the texture of these socks took up a lot more yarn than I was expecting, and so I was definitely playing yarn chicken at the end. Those are all my July socks. In August, the Colorwork Cuff Club was launched, which I think is a great and fun idea for those of us who love colorwork but also love knitting plain and simple socks. These sock patterns come out at the beginning of the month, and you get a chart for some colorwork as well as a basic sock pattern. So you can knit a bit of colorwork at the beginning and then carry on with a really plain sock in most cases. I jumped on board. I thought this sounded really fun. And again, I got comfortable using my 9-inch circular needle for all of the colorwork cuffs that I knit. The first pair I knit were these flowers. This pattern came out in August, and I was at a local yarn shop called Statement Junkie, and they had some yaw wool with this really beautiful bright peachy color and this deep teal. And I saw the two of them together, and I thought they would be great for some color work, and I think that they really work for this pattern. I used a 50-gram ball of each, and I had very little of this teal left over, so I ended up doing bright pink toes to make sure that I wouldn't run out. But I think these are really pretty, and I loved knitting this color work as my first sort of project. I think I got a little bit better. The first sock flowers were maybe a little bit looser than my second ones, and I think that was a theme for a lot of my socks. As I get more comfortable knitting color work on a small circumference, there is a bit of discrepancy between my gauges on the first and second socks, but it's a learning opportunity and no one's going to be looking at my ankles that closely. So these are my first pair of August colorwork cuff socks. And in August, Summer had two patterns that came out, or two charts that came out. And so I decided to knit both. This is my second pair of socks from August. And this pattern was meant to mimic granny stripe blanket or granny stripe crochet. And so I used similar colors to my Scandiland socks, if you remember these ones. And I just threw in a really fun neon color for some contrast. These ones, again, were really fun and more simple to knit because it was a more simple chart. You can see that you're carrying the yarns a lot less in this one as compared to the Twisted Flowers. And it was just a bit more straightforward. I think that they're so much fun, and I can see that I definitely have a color palette that I really like to work with. And I probably mimic Summer's sock choices a lot too. In September, September's Colorwork Cuff Club pattern included this really cute boxes pattern, and there was the option to knit it only at the top of the cuff or to carry it down the sock. And I liked it so much I thought I'd just knit the whole thing. Summer suggests using an afterthought heel cut in at some point in the pattern. I decided to use a different heel. This is the butterfly heel, which is sort of an option to a short row heel. And it is in a lot of patterns written by K.F. Jones of the Bakery Bears. So if you're looking for another fun sock designer, I would recommend her patterns, and especially her butterfly heel. I use it a lot. I stuck this one in as I was knitting, so I just knit the colorwork down to here, and then I knit my butterfly heel, which again is similar to a short row heel, and then I kept going with the color work, and I think that worked really nicely for these socks. I like the pop of a bright color as a contrast with some neutrals, and I think that these socks turned out really lovely, and it was a lot of fun knitting this pattern, and so knitting the color work all the way to the toe was sort of an easy choice for me. In October, Summer came out with some delightful Halloween socks. These ones had little ghosts on them, and I shamelessly copied her colors. Again, you can see that my gauge was a little off from sock to sock, or maybe it's harder to see now that I've worn them and washed them. But this is my first sock, and I was a little bit looser. I think that I was worried about the cuffs being too tight as I was knitting. I didn't want to have socks that I couldn't wear because I couldn't get them on my feet. So I knit this first set of ghosts, and then you can see that my gauge tightens up a little bit as it comes down. On my second sock, the gauge is still a little bit looser in the color work, but it does definitely snug up as it goes down. That's probably not a bad thing. Color work doesn't stretch as much as regular stockinette because of those strands of yarn in the back. I'll even show you my insides if you like. So these strands of yarn here really limit the stretch horizontally on socks versus stockinette stitch. And so it's important for those to be loose. And I guess I'm still working on finding the right balance between loose strands and too loose tension. November's Colorwork Cuff Club chart is a very classic Farrell pattern. And I chose some fun bright colors to knit with, but I think that in this case, some of my color choices weren't great. Now, it's not totally obvious, but these contrast little stitches here, as well as this round here, are knit in a white color from West Yorkshire Spinners. And this background color here is a very pale pink from Knit Pick Stroll called Horchata. In retrospect, there isn't enough contrast to really tell the difference between those two. It's not super obvious, and I don't think it looks bad, but I think in future I would look for more contrast between colors in the chart. Because the two colors aren't next to each other, it didn't really, I think it didn't really make the sock a failure, or it wasn't the wrong choice, but I could have had more contrast between these two background colors. having said all that, I think these colors are lovely. I think the chart pattern was lots of fun. It was a great sock to knit, and I think these are some very lovely classic socks for my collection. For these socks, I used a Mondim, Retrosaria Mondim sock base that I haven't used a lot in the past, and I really like them. I think they feel like a really sturdy, strong sock yarn, and it was great to use in color work. So that was a win. Trying a new sock yarn was great. And my last pair of colorwork socks for this year was the December Colorwork Cuff Club by Summer Lee, again, obviously. And I decided to knit both designs in a pair of mismatched but similar, I guess, fraternal twin socks. Summer, again, very clever, came out with these two patterns that are holiday inspired but not overly holiday. There was the option to add some snow in the background or not, depending on where you live and what your Christmases or holidays look like. And so I started out with the house pattern, and that was probably a good thing because it was challenging. For certain rows, there are 4 colors that you carry across the row, and that for me was definitely a challenge. This cuff, where all the color work is happening, is definitely thicker because of all of those strands of yarn. And I was glad that I had chosen to knit one of each because the tree pattern for me was a lot easier. I did knit the snow, which apparently adds difficulty to the pattern, and I see why. There are more rows where you have multiple colors being used, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I also chose to knit the striped sock feet because I thought that would be fun. It reminded me a lot of those other striped socks that I knit in the past, and I think that these were, again, a very successful sock. I did use colors very similar to the ones that Summer used, and I did play yarn chicken. I had very little of this light blue left, and I was trying to think of ways to stretch it out or other colors I could use, but fortunately in the end I had enough yarn to make it through. And that was my last pair of Summer Lee socks for this 2024 year. I know it looks like I knit only Summer Lee socks. I knit a lot of other socks too. I knit plain socks and I knit sweaters and other projects, but for this year, for some reason, socks really took a hold of my imagination, and I was having a lot of fun knitting textured socks, striped socks, colorwork socks, mostly inspired by my favorite sock designer, Summer Lee. 2024 was definitely the year of Summer Lee socks for me. The sock project book and the colorwork cuff club were both great inspirations for me, and I enjoyed every minute of knitting all of these socks. I'm not sure which of these socks will be kept for me or given to my daughters or maybe gifted in the next little while, but I know that I really had a great time this year knitting socks inspired by Summer Lee. And I look forward to that continuing in 2025. Thanks for joining me for my recap of Summer Lee socks I knit in 2024, and I look forward to sharing with you all of the things that I knit in 2025. Happy New Year to you and to your families, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I hope in the next little while you get a chance to do some of the things that you like to do. I know I plan on knitting a lot.